Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another webinar in our Market Access and International Approvals webinar series. My name is Daniel Bruno and I'm part of the Testing and Certifications technical staff here at Visa Compliance Laboratories. Today I'll be presenting to you the certification and approval regulations as well as the technical requirements for electrical equipment, electronics, and wireless product and device approvals in the United States. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, regulates interstate and international communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and U.S. territories. It's an independent U.S. government agency overseen by Congress, and is responsible for implementing and enforcing America's communications law and regulations. The FCC regulates radio frequency, or RF devices, contained in electronic electrical products that are capable of emitting radio frequency energy by radiation, conduction, or other means. These products have the potential to cause interference to radio services operating in the radio frequency range of 9 kHz to 3000 GHz. Visa Laboratories is an EMC RF compliance test lab, product certification body, and expert in global regulatory affairs for RF devices. So today, we will be primarily going over the requirements of radio frequency and telecommunications approvals in the U.S. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the major topics necessary to understand to get your radio devices on the right track for authorization and distribution in America. If you have any questions on the topics presented today, or any other media questions regarding compliance testing and product certifications, you can reach us at info@visacompliance.com. So without further ado, let's begin the presentation. So starting with a brief overview, what is the FCC? The FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, regulates communications by radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable, and enforces the communications laws in the USA. Radio frequency devices are required to be properly authorized under 47 CFR Part 2 prior to being marketed or imported into the United States. The Office of Engineering and Technology, or OET, administers the Equipment Authorization Program under the authority delegated to it by the Commission. This program is one of the principal ways the Commission ensures that RF devices used in the United States operate effectively without causing harmful interference, and otherwise comply with the principal ways the Commission ensures that RF devices used in the United States operate effectively without causing harmful interference and otherwise comply with the Commission's rules. All RF devices subject to equipment authorization must comply with the Commission's technical requirements prior to importation or marketing. The Policy and Rules Division conducts proceedings to develop policy and rules with respect to spectrum, allocation, and use. Equipment authorization and unlicensed devices. The Electromagnetic Compatibility Division plans and conducts studies on radio wave propagation and communication systems characteristics, as well as develops analytical techniques and models to improve spectrum utilization. The Laboratory Division is responsible for the evaluation of radio frequency devices and related technologies to determine their interference or risk potential and technical operating parameters in order to apply appropriate technical standards for the compliance, or, in the case of new RF technologies, develop technical standards and recommend appropriate action. So the FCC has two different approval procedures for equipment authorization, and that's Certification and Supplier's Declaration of Conformity, or SDOC. The required procedure depends on the type of equipment being authorized as specified in the applicable rule part. In some instances, a device may have different functions, resulting in the device being used to more than one type of approval procedure. Let's start with certification. Certification is the more formal and thorough approval process which applies to all RF devices as they have the greatest potential to cause harmful interference to radio services. It's an equipment authorization issued by an FCC-recognized telecommunications certification body, or TCB, based on an evaluation of the supporting documentation and test data submitted by an applicant for for example, a manufacturer or importer. Testing must be performed by an FCC-recognized accredited testing laboratory, and information, including the technical parameters and descriptive information for the certified equipment, will be posted on a public database. The procedure that is applicable for equipment authorization depends on the applicable FCC rule parts that apply to the radio frequency functions. An intentional radiator or radio transmitter is required to be approved using the certification procedure, unless otherwise stated in a rule. Equipment that consists of only a radio transmitter, or not a transceiver, such as a remote control transmitter, land mobile radio transmitter, and wireless medical telemetry transmitter, are required to be approved using the certification procedure. Unintentional radiators or digital circuitry are approved using the SDOC procedure. The Supplier's Declaration of Conformity, or SDOC, is a procedure that requires a responsible party, usually a manufacturer, be responsible for compliance and to ensure that their equipment complies with the appropriate technical standards. The responsible party, who must be located in the United States, it is not required to file a formal equipment authorization application with a telecommunications certification body, or TCB. Equipment that only contains digital circuitry, does not contain a radio transmitter, such as computer peripherals, microwave ovens, consumer ICM equipment, switching power supplies, LED light bulbs, radio receivers, and TV interface devices, are subject to approval using the SDOC procedure or may optionally use the certification procedure. Equipment authorized under the SDOC procedure is not listed in the FCC database. However, the responsible party or any other party marketing the equipment must be able to provide the test report and other information demonstrating compliance with the rules. And in addition, equipment subject to approval using the Supplier's Declaration of Conformity, or SDOC, procedure can also elect to use the certification procedure. Many products these days, for example, devices such as mobile phones, wireless local area networking equipment, notebook computers, and tablet computers, are a combination of radio transmitters requiring approval using the certification procedure and an unintentional digital circuitry requiring the use of the SDOC procedure. Okay, so now we know that our RF devices require authorization prior to import, sale, distribution, and operation within the U.S. Now let's take a look at the equipment authorization process. This process is how the FCC ensures that RF devices used in the United States operate effectively without causing harmful interference and otherwise comply with the Commission's rules. Here we see the high-level review of the equipment authorization process. The first step is to determine the FCC's rules that are applicable to your device. This consists of initially determining if the device is a radio frequency device, regulated by the FCC and subject to the FCC rules. Then determining all applicable technical and administrative rules that apply to the device requiring an equipment authorization. If a device is subject to FCC rules, then the next step, we must determine the specific type of equipment authorization that applies to the device. As explained in the last slide, there are two possible equipment authorization procedures for your device: Supplier's Declaration of Conformity, or SDOC, and certification. After that, the required tests must be performed to ensure the device complies with the applicable technical requirements. The qualifications of the testing laboratory used to demonstrate the compliance is based on the approval procedure you are required to use. Equipment approved under the certification procedure is required to be tested by an FCC-recognized accredited testing laboratory, such as Visa Labs. Finally, after the testing is complete and your device is deemed to be in compliance with applicable rules, the equipment authorization approval process begins. and the equipment is authorized based on the approval procedure that applies to the device. If you recall, the FCC regulates radio frequency devices containing electrical products that are capable of emitting radio frequency energy by radiation, conduction, or any other means. These products have the potential to cause interference to radio services operating in the radio frequency range of 9 kHz to 3,000 GHz. Devices operating in this frequency range are considered intentional radiators, which require equipment authorization by means of a certification. Incidental radiators and unintentional radiators fall under the supplier's responsibility and are regulated by test lab evaluation and supplier's declaration of conformity. Incidental radiators are devices that are not designed to intentionally use, intentionally generate, or intentionally emit radio frequency energy. And unintentional radiators are devices that use digital logic or electrical signals somewhere within the product, but is also not intended to emit RF energy wirelessly. Intentional radiators and other categories such as ISM equipment and licensed radio equipment are covered under the certification process. These products generate and emit radio frequency energy. ISM equipment, or industrial, scientific, and medical equipment, are devices that use RF energy for purposes other than for radio telecommunication. Some ISM equipment can use SDOC, depending on the specific rules that are applicable. For example, consumer ultrasonic equipment generating less than 500 watts and operating below 90 kHz, and non-consumer ISM equipment are subject to supplier's declaration of conformity. Products that use licensed radio spectrum, from fixed microwave links to cellular telephones to mobile broadband services, are considered RF devices and are subject to equipment authorization by certification. An incidental radiator is an electrical device that is not designed to intentionally use, intentionally generate, or intentionally emit radio frequency energy over 9 kHz. However, an incidental radiator may produce the byproducts of radio emissions above 9 kHz and cause radio interference. These products are regulated under FCC rules CFR Part 15, Subpart A. A product that is classified as an incidental radiator device is not required to obtain an equipment authorization, although incidental radiators are still regulated under the general operating conditions, meaning if there is harmful interference, the user must stop operation. Manufacturers and importers should elaborate these devices before they market and sell their products in order to minimize possible interference. Examples of products that are classified as incidental radiators include AC and DC motors, mechanical light switches, basic electrical power tools that do not contain digital logic. Supplier's declaration of conformity is allowed for incidental radiators. Generally, if a device doesn't operate or generate frequencies more than 9 kHz, there's not much to measure. But for devices where you may be unsure whether it is an incidental radiator or a combination with digital functions as well, an SDOC should be made. An unintentional radiator is a device that, by design, uses digital logic, or electrical signals operating at radio frequencies for use within the product, or sends radio frequency signals by conduction to associated equipment via connecting wiring, but is not intended to emit RF energy wirelessly by radiation or induction. Today, the majority of electrical products use digital logic, operating between 9 kHz to 3,000 GHz, and are regulated under 47 CFR Part 15, Subpart B and G. These rules contain the requirements, such as the test levels or limits for the results of the measurements. Examples of unintentional radiators include coffee pots, wristwatches, cash registers, personal computers, printers, telephones, garage door receivers, wireless temperature probe receiver, RF universal remote control, and thousands of other types of common electronic electrical equipment that rely on digital technology. This also includes many traditional products that were once classified as incidental radiators, like motors and basic electrical power tools that now use digital logic. Suppliers' declaration of conformity is required for unintentional radiators, although products that only contain digital logic may also be specifically exempted from an equipment authorization under certain situations. So to summarize, incidental radiators are not designed to intentionally use, intentionally generate, or intentionally emit radio frequency energy. Unintentional radiators use digital logic or electrical signals within the product, but is not intended to emit RF energy wirelessly. Next, we will look further into devices that intentionally generate and emit radio frequency energy, industrial, scientific, and medical equipment, and products that use the licensed radio program. An intentional radiator is a device that intentionally generates and emits radio frequency energy by radiation or induction that may be operated without an individual license. Intentional radiators are regulated under FCC Rules 47 CFR Part 15 Subpart C through F and H. And again, this is where you can find the criteria for threshold limits for a product to pass evaluation measurements. Examples of intentional radiators include wireless garage door openers, wireless microphones, RF universal remote control devices, cordless telephones, wireless alarm systems, Wi-Fi transmitters, and Bluetooth radio devices. Certification is required for unintentional radiators. When electronic electrical products are used for providing RF energy for other than telecommunications applications, such as the production of physical, biological, or chemical effects, such as heating, ionization of gases, mechanical vibrations, and acceleration of charged particles, these devices fall under the FCC Rules 47 CFR Part 18. Examples include fluorescent lighting, halogen ballasts, arc welders, microwave ovens, and medical diathermy machines. Keep in mind, a general consumer medical device does not typically come under this classification. Rather, Part 18 applies for medical equipment only when it is designed to generate and use RF energy locally for medical or therapeutic purposes. Equipment authorization by certification or an SDOC is required for ISM equipment under Part 18. For equipment operating in licensed radio services, these products are the ones that use a licensed radio spectrum. This can range from fixed microwave links to cellular telephones, to mobile broadband services, and are considered radio frequency devices that are subject to equipment authorization. Some rule parts for licensed radio equipment are 47 CFR Part 96 for CBRS, or Citizen Band Radio Services, Part 27, Broadband Radio Services, or BRS Broadband, Part 22, Cellular Service, and Part 20 and 90 for Signal Boosters. Some examples of licensed radio equipment subject to certification include low-power TV transmitters, cell phone, smartphones, base stations, licensed point-to-point microwave radios, private land mobile transmitters, aviation and marine radios. Certification is required for licensed radio equipment radiators. So to summarize, intentional radiators, ISM equipment, and licensed radio equipment require approval under the certification procedure and are required to be tested by an FCC-recognized accredited testing laboratory, as well as review all the supporting information and evaluation results to determine if the product complies with the FCC requirements by a telecommunications certification body, or TCB. Finally, a grant of certification is issued by the TCB on the FCC Equipment Authorization Electronic System. Incidental radiators and unintentional radiators fall under SDOC, which also requires testing, but it is the responsibility of the manufacturer to warrant that each unit of the equipment complies with FCC rules and does not require TCV review. We had just touched on regulated products and the FCC rules containing the requirements. Now we will take a brief look at the measurement procedures used by testing laboratories to demonstrate compliance with the FCC rules. The measurement procedures can be classified as general EMC and radio equipment measurement procedures for unlicensed band operation, equipment operating in licensed radio services, and RF exposure measurement procedures for the measurement of the strength of electromagnetic fields. When making measurements to demonstrate compliance with FCC rules, it is required to use the appropriate measurement methods as specified in the particular section of the FCC rules. For general EMC and RF measurement procedures, we have the measurement of UHF noise figures of TV for FCC Rule Part 15 for TV receivers. For Part 15B unintentional radiators, the procedure is ANSI C63.4, the methods of measurement of radio noise emission from low voltage electrical and electronic equipment in the range of 9 kHz to 40 GHz. Part 15C for intentional radiators follows C63.10, procedures for compliance testing of unlicensed wireless devices. For unlicensed personal communication services, or UPCS, it's 63.17, the methods of measurement of the electromagnetic and operational compatibility of UPCS devices. For UNI and DFS measurements, we follow the FCC released publication 905462 for unlicensed National Information Infrastructure devices operating in the 5 GHz band, 5,250 MHz to 5,350 MHz, and 5,470 MHz to 5,725 MHz bands, incorporating dynamic frequency selection. We use methods of measurement of radio noise emissions from industrial, scientific, and medical equipment for Part 18 ISM equipment. Looking at the requirements for applicants, in general, it's 1 or 2 samples. Depending on how the measurement goes, more samples may be required. Within each category, the lead time for evaluation and measurement varies. It also further depends on the complexity, supported different interfaces, functionality, and radio technology types. General equipment takes 1 to 2 weeks if it contains one radio technology, such as Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Composite devices containing more than one tech, such as a combination of Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, will take longer. Lead times will increase significantly if SAR or DFS measurements are required. Samples requirements may also depend on the antenna type and if it's removable. Generally, separate samples are needed for the RF conducted part and the radiated measurement. Samples must also be able to sweep over the full spectrum continuously. If there are multiple radio functions, multiple samples will be required if each sample only supports a single radio function. The measurement process will naturally take longer if there is a need for troubleshooting. Here's a look at the testing requirements for supplier's declaration of conformity. EMC emissions testing will be performed. Immunity testing is not required in the U.S. At least one sample in end-user operation mode, including all necessary accessories, is required for Part 15B EMC testing. Conducted emissions is required if there is an AC power supply included or Ethernet ports. All ports must be populated during testing. Radiated emissions is required for all devices. For supplier's declaration of conformity, the responsible party, as specified in the rules, warrants that each unit of equipment complies with the applicable FCC rules. The responsible party maintains all of the required documentation demonstrating compliance with the applicable FCC rules. The responsible party prepares a compliance information statement to be supplied with the product at the time of marketing. And the responsible party must be in the United States. We know that FCC has two different approval procedures for equipment authorization, and that's Certification and Supplier's Declaration of Conformity, or SDOC. We had just detailed the requirements for the SDOC approval scheme. Now let's move on to the certification procedure. Here's a look at the testing requirements for certification. EMC emissions testing will be performed. Again, immunity testing is not required by the FCC. We require additionally a conducted and radiated form of the equipment. These must be equipped with software to control the radio performance. RF testing and RF exposure measurements are also performed. A list of various testing items are provided here. For certification, the manufacturer obtains an FCC registration number, or FRN, for a device requiring certification. The FRN is a 10-digit number used to identify the individual or organization doing business with the FCC. The same FRN will be used for future approvals. After obtaining an FRN, the responsible party obtains a grantee code from the Commission by applying at the grantee registration website. The grantee code is required for the first time a party applies for certification and can be used for all future approvals. The product codes are uniquely established by the grantee to identify each product approved by Telecommunications Certification Body, or TCB. The product code can be up to 14 alphanumeric characters. The responsible party files with the Telecommunications Certification Body an application for a grant of certification. An application for equipment authorization requires submission of information about the product. The applicant must submit the required information to a TCB for review as part of the certification process. The TCB reviews all the supporting information and the evaluation results to determine if the product complies with the FCC requirements. Once the TCB makes a decision to certify the product, the supporting information is uploaded to the FCC Equipment Authorization Electronic System, or EAS, database. Finally, a grant of certification is issued by the TCB on the FCC Equipment Authorization Electronic System database. Taking a look at the certification and review process, when all the required information has been received, our administrative review examines the documents to determine if all submittal information is complete, accurate, and correctly prepared for certification. A complete application is required before the technical review can begin, and before the application can be processed. Once the administrative reviewer has determined that all necessary documents are present, the application of documents will be forwarded to the technical reviewer. If information or documentation is missing during the administrative review, the applicant will be informed about the administrative or technical information that is needed. Next, a technical review shall be performed to determine if the applicant's test data and reports satisfy the applicable requirements. Items relating to the conformance of the equipment to the necessary technical requirements shall be evaluated, including but not limited to test procedures performed, test data, test equipment used, including information about its calibration status, user's manual, schematics and block diagram supplied by the manufacturer, operational descriptions supporting descriptions if necessary, plots or other data if necessary. After completing the administrative review and technical review, the findings from each shall be forwarded to the responsible person for certification. The responsibility for certification shall analyze the findings and the recommendations from the administrative and technical revisions and then present a decision to the applicant. Will review the documentation provided is complete to take a decision about the certification of the device. Here's a list of technical documentation, supporting information, and results of the testing evaluations that the TCB reviews to determine if the product complies with the FCC requirements. The grant of equipment authorization certification is shown on the right. Form 731 is the application form for FCC certification services. Authorization letter to allow a third party to submit the application and/or to sign the application on behalf of the applicant. Confidentiality request letter requests for confidentiality of certain documents. A copy of the installation and operating instructions manual to be provided to the user. A draft document is acceptable. Parts list or tune-up info, tune-up procedure over the power range or at specific operating power levels, applicable only to licensed radio devices. A brief description of the circuit functions of the device along with a statement describing how the device operates, including a description of the radio circuitry and how the radio signal is developed. A block diagram showing the frequency of all oscillators in the device. Pictures or a sample drawing of the device should be provided, including FCC ID of the device. A photograph or picture indicating the label location of the device should also be provided. A report of measurements showing compliance with the pertinent FCC tech. This report must identify the test procedure used, the date the measurements were made, the location where the measurements were made, and the device that was tested. RF exposure information detailing how the device complies with FCC RF exposure requirements. Other requirements may include modular approval letters in the case that the product is to be certified as a module. It's a letter stating that modular approval conditions are met must accompany the application. STR software and security information to describe the software and security. This is only required for software-defined radio or cognitive radio. Other cover letters depending on the type of product and type of application. Some cover letters may be required explaining or detailing some aspect of the application, such as equipment having multiple models. It's common to require a few rounds of updates to forms and documents before finalizing the submission to the FCC. Now that we have described the requirements for certification and supplies declaration of conformity, we'll talk briefly about other relevant requirements and information. A radio transmitter module can apply for an FCC grant. Modules can be installed in different end-use products, referred to as a host, host product, or host device, by the grantee or other equipment manufacturer. Then the host product may not require additional testing or equipment authorization for the transmitter function provided by that specific module or limited module device. Modular approvals are for tangible, clearly delineated devices that operate when installed within or attached to a host product in one of the following four physical configurations, i.e. modular type. Singular modular transmitter, a complete RF transmission subassembly designed to be incorporated into another device that must demonstrate compliance with FCC rules and policies independent of any host. Limited single modular transmitter, a single modular transmitter that complies with the modular rules only when constrained to specific operating hosts and/or associated grants conditions. Split modular transmitter, an RF transmission system that complies with the requirements for a single modular transmitter that is separated into a radio front-end section and a control element section, and can demonstrate compliance for a range of similar type hosts. Limited split modular transmitter, a split modular transmitter that complies with the definition and technical rules for split modules only when constrained to specific operating hosts and/or associated grant conditions. There are specific requirements for something to be classified as a radio module. The radio elements must have the radio frequency circuitry shielded. Physical components and tuning capacitors may be located external to the shield, but must be on the module assembly. The module must have buffered modulation data inputs to ensure the device will comply with Part 15 requirements with any type of input signal. The module must contain power supply regulation on the module. The module must contain a permanently attached antenna or contain a unique antenna connector and must be connected or marketed and operated only with specific antennas. The module must demonstrate compliance in a standalone configuration. The module must be labeled with its permanently affixed FCC ID label or use an electronic display. The module must comply with all specific rules applicable to the transmitter, including all conditions provided in the integration instructions by the grantee. And the module must comply with RF exposure requirements. Many modern products are taking advantage of wireless transmitter modules that have been FCC certified by a module manufacturer to demonstrate compliance with the FCC rules. Wireless modules today are integrated transmitter circuits that are embedded in both simple and complex host products. When using certified transmitter modules, it is necessary for the host product manufacturer or host integrator to have a good understanding of RF engineering and electromagnetic compatibility concepts and principles, and knowledge of FCC regulations. Leveraging the certification of a modular transmitter has the advantage of reducing subsequent FCC filing requirements, but there are limitations on host products manufacturers in making modifications or changes to the modular transmitter and the types of antennas that can be used in final products. Host product manufacturers are responsible to follow the integration guidance and to perform a limited set of transmitter module verification testing to ensure the end product is in compliance with the FCC rules. Also, host product manufacturers are responsible for all additional equipment authorization and testing for technical requirements not covered by the module grant. For example, unintentional radiator Part 15 Subpart B requirements or other transmitters used in the host that are not certified modules. A modular transmitter may also be certified to be used with other specific certified modules which transmit simultaneously. The host product operating conditions must be such that there is a minimum separation distance of 20 centimeters or possibly greater than 20 centimeters between the antenna radiating structures and nearby persons. The host manufacturer is obligated to confirm the use conditions of the host product to ensure the distance specified in the instructions is met. The host product is then classified as either a mobile device or a fixed device for RF exposure purposes. In most cases for host products, certain testing and certification is still required. Labeling requirements for SDOC is shown here. A unique identifier is required. Any means to associate the device with a compliance test report and records for a specific product approved using the SDOC procedure. This may be a trade name and type number, model number, serial number, or other means employed utilizing the responsible party's internal manufacturing process. A compliance information statement that includes the following items must be supplied with the product at the time of marketing or importation. Identification of the product, example given, trade name, model, etc. A statement that the product complies with the rules as applicable, and the name and address and telephone number or internet contact information of the responsible party's contact located in the United States. The FCC logo shall only be used on a product that has been tested, evaluated, and found to be compliant in accordance with the SDOC procedures. The use of the FCC logo on the device does not mitigate the requirements to provide a means to uniquely identify the product or to provide the required compliance information statement. Devices that have an integrated display or devices that are subject to rules for software-defined radios or modular transmitters and are used in a host device that has an integrated display may display electronically the labeling information, provided that the provisions of KDB 784748 for e-labeling are fulfilled. The user's manual or instruction manual for an intentional or unintentional radiator shall caution the use that changes or modifications not expressly approved by the party responsible for compliance could void the user's authority to operate the equipment. In cases where the manual is provided only in a form other than paper, such as on a computer disk or over the internet, the information required by this section may be included in the manual in the alternative form, provided the user can reasonably be expected to have the capability to access information in that form. The labeling requirements for certifications are shown here. Each equipment covered in an application for equipment authorization shall have a label listing the FCC identifier, consisting of the grantee code and product code. The grantee code form has 3 or 5 characters in length. The equipment product code is selected by the applicant grantee and consists of a series of alphanumeric characters, capital letters, or a combination, and may include the dash or hyphen, up to 14 total characters. Other statements or labeling requirements imposed by the rules governing the operation of the specific class of equipment, except that such statements of compliance may appear in a separate label at the option of the applicant grantee. The label shall be permanently affixed to the equipment and shall be readily visible to the purchaser at the time of purchase. Alternatively, devices that have an integrated display, or devices that are subject to rules for software-defined radios or modular transmitters and are used in a host device that has an integrated display, may display electronically the labeling information. The user's manual or instruction manual for an intentional radiator shall caution the user that changes or modifications not expressly approved by the party responsible for compliance could void the user's authority to operate the equipment. It is the responsibility of the grantee to maintain all documentation as part of their responsibility for the retention of records and ensure that the manufactured products are in compliance. Importation of radio frequency equipment requires that the product either has the required FCC equipment authorization, is only being imported for evaluation purposes, is only being imported for demonstration at a trade show. For SDOCs, the importer is the responsible party. For certifications, the grantee is the responsible party. As we all know, FCC has severe penalties for non-compliance. The FCC may request samples for certified equipment for FCC inspection. If compliance issues arise, the grantee will be required to address those, or the grant may be subject to revocation or withdrawal of the equipment authorization. Withdrawal would result in the item not being able to be imported, marketed, or sold in the United States. Failure of a responsible party or other party marketing equipment to comply with a request from the FCC or TCB for equipment samples or vouchers within 21 days may cause for actions such as suspending action processing on applications for certification submitted by a grantee. When a device is modified, all proposed changes must be considered to determine the type of additional filing required. Some changes to consider can be the antenna, PCB hardware, enclosure, software, or new RF exposure evaluation. The general guideline is degradation. Class 1 permissive changes are changes that do not degrade or worsen the results previously provided to the FCC. A Class 2 permissive change includes those modifications which degrade the performance characteristics as reported at the time of the initial certification. Such degradation performance must still meet the minimum requirements of the applicable rules. When a Class 2 permissive change is made by the grantee shall supply complete information and the results of tests and the characteristics affected by such change. The modified equipment shall not be marketed under the existing grant of certification prior to the issue of the new grant covering the modification. A Class 3 permissive change includes a modification to the software of a software-defined radio transmitter that changes the frequency range, modulation type, or maximum output power, either radiated or conducted, outside the parameters previously approved, or that change the standard which the transmitter operates in accordance with FCC rules. When a Class 3 permissive change is made, The grantee self-supply is a description of the changes and test results showing that the equipment complies with the applicable rules with the new software loaded, including compliance with the applicable RF exposure requirement. This concludes our webinar on United States market access, certifications, and approvals for electrical equipment and wireless products. I hope this webinar was helpful for you in determining which equipment authorization procedure apply to your device, and what the process for approval and certification is like, as well as what the requirements may be applicable. Compliance with the technical requirements of the FCC is required for all radio and telecom products and ensures that any wireless equipment does not degrade performance or cause interference with the existing network to which it is connected, provides suitable safety to end users, and ensure RF emissions comply with the relevant standards. All electrical equipment and devices require approval and testing in the U.S. prior to distribution or placement on the market. Visa Compliance Lab specializes in certifications, approvals, and compliance testing for electrical and radio frequency devices and is a 17025 accredited EMC RF compliance test lab and 17065 accredited product certification body. We are a telecommunications certification body in the US, Canada, EU, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan, where we provide certification and approvals for all product types in countries all over the world. If you'd like to stay in touch with regulatory updates, follow us online. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions on the information presented today, or any general inquiries, you can reach us anytime at info@visacompliance.com. Thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.